The question no one wants to answer: what if the cost of living crisis isn't a temporary problem, but the final stage of a system working exactly as designed? Everywhere you look, households are under pressure. Rent climbs faster than wages. Groceries feel lighter, receipts feel heavier. Energy bills arrive like warnings instead of statements. And yet, officials keep saying the same thing: inflation is cooling. The economy is strong. So here's the mystery: if the economy is improving, why does daily life feel harder than ever? Tonight, we're not just talking about prices. We're uncovering the hidden mechanics of household economics, how families became shock absorbers for global financial systems, how small monthly costs turned into permanent burdens, and why this pattern has happened before. With consequences most people forget, the answers won't come immediately. Because to understand the cost of living, we have to rewind, far before today, as grocery bills and rent hikes, and follow the chain of cause and effect that quietly reshaped everyday life. Setting the stage: how households became economic battlefields. For most of modern history, household economics were simple. Families earned wages, bought essentials, saved modestly, and planned for the future. Prices rose slowly. Paychecks, while imperfect, generally kept pace. Stability, not wealth, was the goal. After World War II, many economies adopted a model built on rising productivity, stable employment, and expanding middle classes. Governments regulated key industries. Housing was affordable relative to income. Energy was cheap. Debt existed, but it wasn't the foundation of survival. But behind the scenes, the system was already shifting. By the late 20th century, financial markets grew more powerful than labor markets. Corporations focused on shareholder value. Governments leaned on credit to fuel growth. And households, slowly and quietly, became more dependent on borrowing to maintain their standard of living. The twist? This dependence didn't feel dangerous at first. It felt like progress. Origins: the moment household costs detached from wages. The story truly begins when wages stopped keeping up. In many countries, productivity continued rising. Workers produced more value per hour than ever before. But instead of flowing into paychecks, those gains concentrated at the top. Profits increased, executive compensation exploded. Asset prices surged. Households filled the gap with debt. Credit cards replaced emergency savings. Mortgages grew larger relative to income. Student loans became lifelong obligations. Families didn't feel richer, they felt stretched, but the system encouraged borrowing as a solution. At the same time, essential sectors were financialized. Housing transformed from shelter into an investment vehicle. Energy markets became profit-driven. Healthcare and education adopted corporate pricing models. Costs rose not because production became more expensive, but because pricing power shifted. This was the first fracture, when survival costs began rising faster than income, permanently. The rise normalizing pressure as the new normal. As the years passed, households adapted. Dual-income families became necessary instead of optional. Side hustles turned into survival strategies. Saving money became harder, but spending became unavoidable. Importantly, this pressure was framed as personal failure, not systemic design. If you struggled, you were told to budget better. If rent rose, you were told to move. If food prices climbed, you were told to shop smarter. The system quietly shifted responsibility downward, from institutions to individuals. Meanwhile, governments relied on households to sustain economic growth through consumption. Central banks used low interest rates to stimulate spending. Rising asset prices masked deeper problems. As long as families kept buying, borrowing, and paying, the system looked stable. But stability built on household strain is not stability. It's delayed collapse. The breaking point when everything rose at once, then came the moment when the system lost its balance. Supply chain shocks, energy disruptions, monetary expansion, and geopolitical stress collided. Prices rose across everything: food, fuel, housing, insurance, healthcare. This wasn't just inflation. It was cost convergence. In the past, households could offset higher prices in one area by saving in another. Now, every category moved upward simultaneously. There was no relief valve. Rent consumed larger shares of income. Groceries shrank while costing more. Utility bills became unpredictable. Even small emergencies became financial disasters, and wages? They lagged behind again. Households reached the limit of adaptation. Debt increased. Savings evaporated. Stress became constant. This wasn't a sudden crisis. It was the moment years of pressure finally became visible. Fallout. The hidden costs nitrogen monoxide 1 tracks. The fallout wasn't just financial. Delayed family formation, fewer children, rising anxiety, burnout, longer working hours with less security. A generation unable to plan beyond the next bill cycle. Household economics don't collapse loudly. They erode quietly. When families cut back, businesses eventually feel it. When consumption slows, growth falters. When debt becomes unmanageable, defaults rise. What begins at the kitchen table ends in boardrooms and government budgets. History shows this pattern clearly. When household balance sheets break, entire economies follow. But instead of addressing root causes, the system often reaches for temporary fixes. Failed fixes. Why the solutions don't work. Governments respond with subsidies, stimulus checks, or short-term relief. Central banks raise or lower interest rates. Corporations adjust pricing strategies. These measures ease symptoms but leave the disease untouched. Why? Because the core issue isn't inflation alone. It's structural household vulnerability. As long as essentials are priced for profit maximization, as long as wages trail productivity, as long as debt substitutes for income, the cost of living will keep rising, even when inflation falls. The system treats households as shock absorbers, not participants. And shock absorbers eventually fail. Modern parallels. History repeating in real time. This isn't the first time. Before the Great Depression, household debt surged while wages stagnated. Before the 2008 financial crisis, housing costs exploded relative to income. Each time, warning signs were dismissed. Today, the pattern is familiar, but broader. The difference now? The pressure touches everything at once. Housing, food, energy, healthcare, education. Household economics have become the front line of global financial stress. And once families reach their limits, the entire system feels it, whether markets admit it or not. 3 key takeaways. What this story really means. First, the cost of living crisis is not accidental. It's the result of decades of shifting risk from institutions to households. Second, inflation cooling does not mean affordability returns. Prices rarely fall, they reset at higher levels. Third, when households weaken, economies follow. There is no sustainable growth without household stability. A warning and an open question. If household economics continue to deteriorate, the next crisis won't begin in banks or markets. It will begin at home. The real question isn't whether the cost of living will keep rising. It is how long households can keep absorbing the pressure before something breaks. And when it does, will anyone still be listening? Call to action. If this video changed how you see your bills, your budget, or the economy itself, take a moment to reflect and share it with someone who feels the pressure too. Subscribe for deeper, story-driven breakdowns of the systems shaping your daily life. Because understanding the cost of living isn't just about money, it's about power, priorities, and the future we're quietly moving toward.